China says Taiwan is an internal matter, a domestic issue, a family dispute that no outside power has the right to interfere in. And yet, every time an American warship sails through the Taiwan Strait, every time a U.S. official steps off a plane in Taipei, every time Washington approves another arms package for the island, Beijing reacts as if the United States has just crossed a line that could lead to war. If Taiwan is truly nothing more than an internal Chinese affair, why does the mere presence of America near that island provoke such a violent, almost existential response from one of the most powerful governments on Earth? That contradiction is not an accident. It is the doorway into one of the most dangerous standoffs of the 21st century. And by the end of this video, you will understand why the answer is far more complicated and far more alarming than anyone tells you. The easy answer is that China wants Taiwan because Taiwan is Chinese territory. That answer is not wrong, but it is dangerously incomplete. It treats a multidimensional strategic obsession as if it were a simple property dispute. The real answer is layered. Taiwan is simultaneously a question of political legitimacy for the Chinese Communist Party, a linchpin in China's military geography, a gatekeeper of the first line of islands separating China from the open Pacific, and home to the most advanced semiconductor manufacturing on the planet. No single one of these factors explains Beijing's behavior. It is the collision of all of them at once, on one island of 23 million people, that makes Taiwan unlike anything else in modern geopolitics. To understand why, you have to go back to 1949, when the Chinese Civil War ended not with a peace treaty, but with a retreat. The defeated nationalist government fled across the strait to Taiwan, while the Communist Party under Mao Zedong took control of the mainland and declared the People's Republic of China. Two governments each claiming to be the legitimate ruler of all of China, separated by 100 miles of water. For decades, this was frozen in place by the Cold War, by American protection, and by a fragile status quo that nobody officially challenged. But that frozen history never actually ended. For the Chinese Communist Party, the unfinished civil war is not ancient history. It is an open wound tied directly to the party's own justification for ruling China. Reunification with Taiwan has been woven into the Communist Party's identity as the guardian of national unity and the party that erased China's so-called century of humiliation. Losing Taiwan permanently or watching it drift into formal independence would not just be a foreign policy setback. It would strike at the very story the party tells about why it deserves to rule. But history is only the first layer. Look at a map, and a second, colder logic appears. Taiwan sits almost exactly at the center of what strategists call the first island chain, a string of islands running from Japan through Taiwan down to the Philippines that forms a natural barrier between mainland China and the open waters of the Pacific. For China's Navy, breaking out into blue water for global reach means passing through or around this chain. Taiwan is the largest, most centrally located obstacle in that wall. If Taiwan were controlled by a hostile power or hosted foreign military forces, it could function as an unsinkable base sitting directly off the Chinese coast, capable of monitoring and potentially choking Chinese naval movement in and out of the Pacific. This is why Beijing does not see Taiwan simply as territory to reclaim. It sees Taiwan as a strategic position that could either open the door to Chinese power projection or permanently lock it shut. Now bring America into the picture, and the puzzle becomes even stranger. The United States does not officially recognize Taiwan as an independent country. There is no formal embassy, no mutual defense treaty in the way America has with Japan or South Korea. And yet the United States sells Taiwan advanced weapons, maintains deep unofficial ties, and has spent decades cultivating a posture known as strategic ambiguity, deliberately refusing to say whether it would send troops to defend Taiwan if China attacked. This is not confusion. It is calculated design. By refusing to give a clear answer, Washington tries to deter Beijing from assuming an invasion would be cost-free, while also restraining Taiwan from making any move toward formal independence that could assume American backing was guaranteed. It is a balancing act built on uncertainty, And for decades, that uncertainty has helped keep an uneasy peace. But uncertainty becomes far more dangerous once both sides start testing its limits. And both sides are testing it. Chinese military aircraft cross into Taiwan's air defense identification zone with increasing frequency. Naval exercises simulate blockades. Cyber intrusions probe Taiwan's infrastructure. This is not necessarily the prelude to a D-Day-style invasion. In many ways, a full amphibious assault across the strait would be one of the most difficult military operations in modern history, exposed, costly, and uncertain. That is precisely why analysts increasingly focus on other options available to Beijing. A blockade could attempt to cut off shipping and force Taiwan's economy into crisis without a single soldier landing on its beaches. A so-called quarantine could impose selective inspections and controls under the language of law enforcement rather than open war. Gray zone pressure, a mix of military intimidation, economic coercion, and cyber operations, could squeeze Taiwan gradually, testing how far Beijing can go before triggering an international response. The most dangerous scenario for Taiwan may not begin with tanks landing on a beach. It may begin quietly, ambiguously, in a way that makes it hard for the world to agree on when a crisis has even started. Then there is the technology. Taiwan is home to the world's leading manufacturer of the most advanced computer chips on the planet. Chips that power everything from smartphones to fighter jets to artificial intelligence systems. This has led many people to reduce the entire Taiwan question to a battle over semiconductors, but that framing is too simple. Chips matter enormously to the global economy, and a war over Taiwan would send shockwaves through industries that depend on that production. But semiconductors are one layer in a much deeper strategic structure, not the foundation of it. China's interest in Taiwan predates the chip industry by decades. What the semiconductor factor does is raise the stakes for everyone else. It means that a crisis in the Taiwan Strait is no longer just a regional dispute between China and a breakaway province in Washington's eyes. It becomes a threat to global technology, supply chains, financial markets, and industries stretching from Seoul to Silicon Valley. It is why the United States has such an intense interest in preventing this particular flashpoint from turning into a shooting war. From Beijing's perspective, none of America's involvement looks defensive. Every arms sale, every high-level visit, every expansion of unofficial ties looks like a deliberate strategy to permanently detach Taiwan from the mainland, disguised as routine diplomacy. Chinese officials describe this as salami-slicing sovereignty, a series of small steps that individually seem minor but collectively push Taiwan further from Beijing's grasp. From Washington's perspective, and from the perspective of many people in Taiwan, China's military pressure looks like an attempt to intimidate a democratic society into submission, to threaten a population of 23 million people out of their own right to choose their political future. Both narratives are internally consistent. Both sides believe they are reacting defensively to the other's aggression. That is what makes this so combustible. And here lies the central paradox that drives the entire crisis. The more China pressures Taiwan militarily, the more Taiwan seeks reassurance and protection from the United States. But the closer the United States moves toward Taiwan to provide that reassurance, the more threatened Beijing feels, which pushes China to increase military pressure even further. Each side's attempt to create security for itself becomes, in the eyes of the other, evidence of an existential threat. This is not a simple standoff between two governments. It is a self-reinforcing cycle where actions meant to stabilize a situation can end up escalating it. This is why Taiwan is considered one of the most dangerous flashpoints on the planet. A conflict here would not stay contained to a war between China and Taiwan. It could pull in the United States under the weight of decades of strategic commitment. It could draw in Japan, whose southern islands sit uncomfortably close to any potential conflict zone. It could disrupt global shipping lanes that carry a significant share of world trade through nearby waters. It could halt semiconductor production that much of the modern economy depends on. It could trigger financial market shocks far beyond Asia. A crisis over one island could reorganize the balance of power across the entire region, and reverberate through economies that have never given Taiwan a second thought. So does China actually intend to invade Taiwan in the near future? Confirmed facts and speculation need to be kept firmly apart here. What is confirmed is that China has significantly expanded its military capabilities aimed at a Taiwan scenario, and that its rhetoric around reunification has hardened. What is strategic analysis, not certainty, is the idea that Beijing may prefer a longer game, gradually eroding Taiwan's international space, testing the limits of American resolve, and increasing the economic and military cost of any future intervention, rather than risking the enormous uncertainty of an immediate full-scale invasion. What would be pure speculation is naming a date. Nobody outside a small circle in Beijing knows the timeline, and anyone claiming certainty about exactly when or whether an invasion will happen is not analyzing the situation, they are guessing. So we return to the question that opened this video. Why won't China let America touch Taiwan? At first it seems like history, an unfinished civil war, and a question of national unity. Then it becomes geography, an island sitting at the exact choke point of China's access to the Pacific. Then it becomes military strategy, the difference between a contained regional power and one capable of projecting force across open water. Then it becomes technology, a supply of chips the entire world depends on. Then it becomes identity, a test of whether the Chinese Communist Party can deliver on the promise that has justified its rule for generations. And finally, it becomes something larger than any of these individually, the place where all of these forces collide directly with the rivalry between the United States and China. Beijing does not see America's presence near Taiwan as a distant country helping a small island. It sees a direct challenge to its territorial claims, its military security, its national identity, and its future as a Pacific power. Washington does not see Taiwan as simply a faraway island either. It sees a critical hinge in the balance of power across Asia and a test of whether China can rewrite the regional order through pressure and intimidation rather than negotiation. Both sides are edging closer and closer to a line neither one wants to admit is there. And that may be the most dangerous question of all. Not whether China will invade Taiwan tomorrow, but whether the United States and China can keep moving closer to the same red line indefinitely without ever actually crossing it.